the modern politics problems. We'll be talking about both the far right and the far left. And the first part of this video will be about the far right, basically here. So basically, the far right, a lot of young people have been put down the far right rabbit hole, including myself as well. I do not think someone like Donald Trump is a far right figure. A far right figure would be someone like, let's just say, what's his? I forgot the guy's name. Oh yeah, the guy named remember Nick Fuentes. That guy would be considered far right. But the problem is the far right may be actually be gaining political power very similarly to how the far left has been gaining power. Look, and we're going over why this is a bad thing and why this could be history repeating itself again. So the far right is basically, we could be comparing this to the 1930s and 1920s, as well as I'm going to be comparing the rise of the far right, comparing it to the 1920s. So the 1920s until 1928 was a very successful time and period in America, and if Roosevelt wasn't elected and did not put up all these reforms that helped people, I think that we could have gone down a far darker path, either communism or Nazism. Both ideologies are very evil and should not be tried again in the 21st century. Okay, Nazism/fascism was an ideology that was created in the 1900s. It was basically created as this like dictatorship-esque. Basically, communism and fascism are very similar. Basically, fascism is basically a dictatorship, but they do allow more free market. And communism, they are a dictatorship, but with the government owns property. That is basically communism and fascism are almost exactly the same. But one is a right, more leans right economically, and the other leans left economically. That's why when you see that on the political compass here, Hitler is actually here. Yeah, he is more economically left than most right-leaning figures, but he is very authoritarian. Stalin is authoritarian, and so basically towards the fascism side, but also far to economic left. Okay, if Stalin did not hold any economic left views, he would almost have the same exact political beliefs as Hitler. Okay, both people were incredibly vile and awful people. Now let's get back to here. So basically the far right conference, including Varadz and Orban again, Orban is basically, he just wants to protect his own country. But also Orban is friends of Vladimir Putin, who is also Vladimir Putin basically kills his own political opponents, so he basically has, so he can basically continue to be president of Russia. Okay, but far right gets youthful vibe of 28-year-old leader, and it seems that even like more like people like Trump, they're gonna have to like try to negotiate with these people, because basically claims of the Uni Party in Washington, which again, they're politicians. What else they're gonna do? They're gonna screw you over. But I think the problem is that I think people are sick with the status quo. Instead of picking candidates that will bring people together and say, you know what, we'll listen to the both sides, they're gonna basically create two massive echo chambers. Okay, that are never gonna get along. I think this was happening in America. Okay. So basically in America, you already have this divide between red and blue states, and really, even in blue states and red states, you still have blue cities and basically red everywhere else. Let's look at the election map of Illinois. You have Chicagoland, which is mostly blue, with the exception of McHenry County, and you have red areas. Okay, It is the same thing with Florida. Yeah, blue cities and most of the state is Republican leading. Florida is actually traded toward the Republicans as well. In New York, the upper portion of the state is more Republican. Meanwhile, New York City is extremely blue, and Long Island is, a swing area. Okay, but the problem with the advancing state of politics is both sides want very different things for the country. Back in the day, when I was younger, both sides could at least try to agree on things. Okay, both sides could agree, hey, we don't like Saddam Hussein, let's get rid of him. Okay, Saddam Hussein, we had enough of his bullshit, get rid of him. Or both sides could come to an agreement on issues. Okay, now it's basically become the House is extremely divided. Republicans, if they don't want to be ousted as rhinos, will basically be forced to vote. Either goes against their beliefs, vote for something. Okay, for example, some of the Republican beliefs is they want abortion illegal. I know they're basically, rolling back on that because a lot of people actually do not support banning abortion and contraceptives. I actually did not know this, but abortion is actually a very old practice. I did not know this until very recently. Also, the right wants to, at least on the far right, want to end any sort of interracial marriage and stuff. Yeah, they actually want that banned. If you go on Twitter, Gab, or any of the sites they use, they're not prevalent on YouTube because YouTube's like, yeah, you can't post that stuff. That's racist. Okay, you can't post that stuff. But they want to basically end that. We're talking about the far right here. Okay, the far right basically want to create America into basically a Christian theocracy, very similar to Iran or Saudi Arabia. Okay, and they want basically schools to teach religion and gender conformity as well. And also, the far right, they want to basically get rid of anyone who isn't ethnically European from the USA. And also the Western world. And it also can expand to Japan now and Korea, as Japan and Korea are now accepting more immigrants because of the population decline, because they don't know how to fix the birth rates, which is a problem we'll cover in a separate video, as well. But the far right, we have discussed their demands, and their demands are very, very extreme. Okay, I think we should meet in the middle on most of these issues. That's where most people lie. Okay, then we have the far left, and what do they want? Far left want abolishment of freedom of speech. They want the abolishment of the First Amendment. The far right also want abolishment of freedom of speech as well, because they want to basically say because that's what all authoritarians want. But they also want to abolish the Second Amendment completely, to keep you safe. They want both sides, the far right and far left, want to establish. The far left want to basically create an anarchist state like Somalia, and the far right want a police state. Which again, it's all too similar to the state, to El Salvador and how they're running the government. I wouldn't be surprised if that could be the average viewpoint for people in the future, as now we're seeing that the anti-police movement is becoming a failure, and what El Salvador is doing is sort of example if we want low crime rates. So I guess the far left is losing on that issue. But basically the far right want to basically create a police state where basically all of the rules that they pass are enforced. And the far left also kind of want to create that as well, even though they want to say, oh, we want to get rid of police so minorities can be safe, even though it won't actually, even though everybody, regardless of skin color, is protected under police as well. But the far left basically want to create, they also want to abolish private property, because a lot of the far left are communists, and they want to basically have everything owned by the government. They want the government to basically take care of you, and basically, so they don't have to do anything, and they can just sit around and do nothing, or the government just gives them money for doing nothing. That's why they want to have universal basic income. They say they want that because robots and stuff, but yeah, they also want to basically go. Basically it's kind of like the Klaus Schwab thing where they want you to eat bugs and live in a pod, that stuff. And the far right, they want to basically be the opposite of that. Okay, they want to be the opposite of that. Okay, as well. So the far right, they want to be the opposite of the far left. They want you to eat meat, obviously, but they want to also ban vegan options. So vegans can't have any options because they don't consider vegans as well. They also are extremely anti-LGBT, and they want it banned in the U.S. like it was in the 1960s. Basically, how America was in the 1950s, the far right want. And basically, the far left wants America to quote unquote progress as well. I think the problem is we can't, that the far right and the far left, most people are gravitating towards, and people can't meet in the middle anymore. The far right tend to be incels and people who are struggling to have, any sort of relationship in their life. Which I have been a person that has struggled to have any sort of relationships in my life. But the far left also have those kind of basically as incels, but it's women. So basically, you see the political divide between men and women, and that's why it's growing even worse and worse in places like the U.S., especially Korea. Okay, I do not think this far right and far left divide is going to end well. It is very, very eerily similar to the 1930s Germany. Okay, where the far right and far left divide was so bad, well, it was basically Hitler, because Hitler was running for office, and Hitler was saying, hey, you normal person was being screwed over by big bad person. Vote for me. I totally will not screw you over and create a fascist police dictatorship. Or there'll be the communist running. I think the worst example of this is Latin America. Okay, Latin America is, especially Brazil, you basically have a far right candidate and a far left candidate. You don't have anyone in between. Okay? And I think that's where America may be heading in the future. You're going to have the far left candidate that wants to have passed all these social reforms that most normal people don't want. And you have this far right guy who basically wants to create like a theocracy and wants to, do all this other stuff as well. Okay, and wants America to return back to basically the 1950s, demographically, religiously, and everything else. There is going to be no agreement in both sides. The normal average American is not going to agree with either. And that is going to be the big problem. And that is the problem with the current government, because we're basically just voting for the lesser of two evils. And with the current American politics, it is basically becoming increasingly clear that the American government is becoming too divided as well. As well. And this is eerily heading towards the 1930s Germany. And it's also happening in Europe and Australia and New Zealand and Canada, Israel, India, and Latin America, and Japan and Korea. People think this is just a Western problem. Oh, the far right's rising in the West. But it's happening all across the world. We've seen a resurgence of just the far left versus the far right, battering it out and trying to take over as many countries as they can until the inevitable happens and another world war breaks out as well. Tensions are high across the world. We have a war in Ukraine, Israel, Sudan, and many more countries. And now with the rise of the far right and the far left, and both the USA and the rest of the world, we're seeing the consequences of this. Secession, people wanting to secede from the United States is at an all-time high. Okay, people not wanting to be a part of America and wanting to secede away from the U.S. is at an all-time high, and that isn't a pretty good look for the country as well. And this is a pretty big problem overall that a lot of people want to secede from the United States. But again, we used to be more united 20 years ago. But now America is so divided and so at our throats against everything as well. I don't think this is going to stop anytime soon. It's only going to accelerate into a civil war between the far right and the far left. Okay? And everyone in the middle will be drafted in. This is a very scary time we're living in. And I think it might also happen to Europe as well. Well, as the far right is gaining in popularity here in Europe and the US and in the globe, this is not a good thing for the people in the middle. I hope people seriously read the facts before going down the alt-right rabbit hole or the far left rabbit hole, because it's something that is very scary and really the internet has enabled. So the internet has caused history to repeat itself again. In the 1920s, the far right and the far left have basically rose into global prominence. And we're seeing the same exact thing happen in this decade too, because of the internet. I wonder if this will lead to mass censorship of both the far right and the far left in the future. I wouldn't be too surprised if that is the case that happens. But yeah, this is a very scary and interesting time we're going through. So that's it about this video here. And yeah, you're expecting a 30 to 40 minute video as well. But basically I explained what the far right and far left want. And I think what hopefully will happen is that we meet in the middle. What the average person wants. Okay? And not what the far right and far left wants. Because if you give in to either side's demand, they're going to want and demand more. And I think that is going to be the problem. Because the far right at least make up 10 to 20% of the population, and a similar sized population makes up the far left. Okay? This includes people who are part of the far left and far right, and includes sympathizers as well. Okay? And yeah. That is it about this video here. Goodbye.